nice. Right, okay, good morning everybody and welcome to our webinar for July. Actually, it's going to be our last webinar for the summer, and we'll come back raring to go in September, and I'll tell you that at the end of the webinar of what we're planning, because we've actually planned it already, which is amazing for me, which is great. It's good, lots of pressure off. But today's webinar, we wanted to kind of put a slot in for benchmarking, and we've called this the power of development benchmarking. Obviously, a big area that we kind of cover for our clients, assumptions reports, etc. So we wanted to kind of cover from that. You know, we like doing kind of industry topics. So and always please pose your topics to us, and we'll put it in the agenda. We'll review it, discuss it. And get kind of people in from the industry as well to talk about that subject matter. But obviously today I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, John Stevens, like that. Who writes this stuff? Oh, me. And he's our senior consultant at SDS, as you say, kind of a nice relaxed. John has a wealth of experience across the sector, both in kind of social and kind of private, and has been working with SDS a long time, and valued his input in what we do across our business. So John, hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Andrew. Yeah, the esteemed colleague is here. Yeah, okay. Ready to go. Yeah,
firing on all cylinders as always. That's always nice. And as I said, we try and make this as interactive as possible. So your questions are all relevant, and if we can't answer them in the session because we're over time, we will answer them and come back to you. So if there are questions you want to pose, please do that in normal fashion. There's a kind of at the bottom of the page, you've got a chat option as well. And we've got a couple of polls. We've got 3 polls that we would like to ask questions on this today. So they will come up in John's presentation as we do. But we're obviously talking about benchmarking, and obviously when we first discussed this, and we've been discussing benchmarking at SDS and how our service can evolve going forward and support our clients and what's the best practice, that we were thinking it would be nice to actually discuss this on a webinar, get some kind of feedback, and put our process kind of to you. So John will do that in a minute. But benchmarking is defined as I was looking at this as a process of measuring products and services, and it kind of and it's looking at that against kind of organizations that are kind of, you know, respected or leaders in the industry. And I suppose when we're looking at benchmarking, for my purpose, there's 2 elements of benchmarking that we want to cover. It's the internal benchmarking and the external benchmarking. So I think we, as SDS and the consultancy side of the business, has done quite well at looking at the external position, and we've been discussing how we can support our clients on the internal, looking at your kind of appraisals against each other, and John will allude to a little bit more as we go forward. So that's a little kind of opening for me. As I said, we've got a couple of polls, and please pose your questions, and John to do his presentation, and we can then open up for further questions from there. So over to you, John.
PowerPoint time, guys. How excited are we? Yeah, okay. So apologies from the start from me. I can be a bit anarchy and go off down rabbit holes, so pull me back if I'm going too deep into something. I have 24 slides to show you and walk you through what the regulator wants and what we have done in the past and what the future may look like. And you get to make some choices with some polls as to what your preferences would be. So I'm going to share the screen and commence a presentation for you guys. So I want to share my screen. And okay, can people see?
Yes, we can.
Slide. Yes, you can see the presentation.
Yep, yeah, if I can, then everyone can.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So the power of development and benchmarking is what we're talking about. But really, the question is, how much was that? Um, is it good value? How much was that jumper? How much was that scheme? Is it good value? Should I buy another? Yeah. Is it value for money? And these days, does this lead to a sustainable lifestyle? So the pressure of the cost of living at the moment, how much was that? Is this sustainable for my lifestyle? And you should be asking, is this also sustainable for us as a business? So how much was your last project? Is this a sustainable business model that we can maintain if we develop more of these projects? That's basically my personal view of looking at development benchmarking. But there is a view from your regulator that it's more important than ever that your boards have a clear understanding of the organization's performance and that they can take evidence-based decisions about the use of limited resources. And that's reflected in the most recent report from the regulator of social housing on their value for money metrics and report. Yes, I can get very anarchy about all the regulator standards. But how much was that? Keep that in mind. Do you know the value of your development projects and your program overall? And who are you going to benchmark against? Who is your peer group? How are you going to compare apples with apples? So performance can be measured against standards. And you do have a lot of standards to be regulated or performed against in the social housing sector. So we've got the regulator of social housing. They've got a data collection website, and boy, are you guys busy sending them data on NROSH. Yeah. You're sending them business plans and your FFR, because we love an abbreviation, don't we, in the sector? Your financial forecast return. If you've got over 1,000 homes, you're doing that annually by the 30th of June. So that's recently happened. And then if you've still got over 1,000 homes, you're sending them quarterly information to the regulator about your financial performance and your delivery. And that's 3 weeks after the quarter end. So finance are really focused on getting these data reports back to the regulator if you're seen as a large provider. Not only that, you actually have to send them your global accounts electronically 6 months after the year end, if you're a large association. If you're a smaller association with under 1,000 homes, that's the statistical data return by the 31st of May. Now, if you're a local authority getting and registered with the regulator and getting their grant, you've actually got to do a data return by mid-July. So there's a lot of regulation or standards out there that you've got to perform to. One of the most recent one from the regulator is tenant satisfaction measures. They came in April, and there will be a question there, won't there? How are you performing? How are you benchmarking on tenant satisfaction once you start reporting this data? So there's a lot of standards out there against which you have to perform. And let's not forget Homes England. We just talked about the regulator. There are standards and performance requirements in your grant agreement if you go for grant with Homes England. There are requirements and standards you have to meet when you submit on the IMS system, that you have to say you're conforming to design standards, MMC, etc. And even space standards. Capital Funding Guide is your best guide to what the performance standards are and where to get the relevant information from Homes England. And then lo and behold, you're going to get audited on things. So I know from being a customer, from being out there, from doing development, there is a lot of regulation, there's a lot of performance there's a lot of standards that we've actually got to perform to. And if we're asked to do development benchmarking, is that too much on top, or is it actually critical to our business? We, of course, would say it's critical to your business, and hopefully I'm going to make a case for that in the next few minutes. But we are under no illusions how much existing reporting there is out there in the sector against these standards. So when you actually go back to just one of those metrics, which is the regulator of social housing, they actually take from the global accounts a value for money metric, and they've been doing this since April 2018. And this is the one we most frequently see reported in the financial statements of housing associations, registered providers. How are they doing against the peer group of the regulators' value for money metrics? Well, what's in these metrics? If we're going to be benchmarked against something in our peer group, the first one, reinvestment in existing and new stock. And that's kind of a development one, isn't it? But it's actually grouping up how much you've spent on existing homes, acquisitions and development. So it's not purely development, it's actually how many new homes relative to the percentage of stock you own. So have you increased your stock by 4%, 2%, 6%? Yeah, through improving existing homes, acquisitions and development. The next one is new supply delivered. That sounds like a development one as well. Basically, it's going to record, again, as a percentage against your own existing stock, how many homes you developed or acquired in the year, yeah, from your global accounts. And you're going to compare yourself against your peer group. And your peer group will be organizations of a similar size in a similar geography with similar challenges. So how many can you think of as a unique organization as you are? Where is your peer group? These are the other metrics, and they take a bit of explaining and understanding, but gearing is basically how much you're borrowing as a percentage of your assets, the value of your assets. Yeah, so how much is your borrowing compared to the value of your assets, i.e. the value of your stock. Crikey, this one takes a bit of explaining. Yeah, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization and major repairs included, major repairs included. Yeah, the abbreviation that everybody kind of shares in a slight regional accent is EBITDA. EBITDA plus MRI, which is major repairs included, compared to your interest cover. What does that actually mean? That actually means the ability of earnings to cover debt payments. So if fancy finance people talk about EBITDA and plus MRI, it's basically, have we got enough earnings to cover our debt payments versus the interest cover? So all of these, there's 7 of them that are reflected back to you, and these are the ones that are displayed and discussed at board. Headline social housing costs per unit. Well, from your global accounts, they will ask you, what is your average management cost per unit, plus the service charges typically averaged, plus the maintenance and major repairs and any other costs. It's very interesting to actually go and see what the management cost looks like, because do they bear any relation to the management assumptions that we see in appraisals? No, they're a lot higher. Operating margin, well, that's looking at the profitability, which is actually looking at your organizational surplus divided by the turnover. And finally, return on capital employed, which is basically looking at what you've achieved versus the assets. Yeah, so I've tried to summarize what these 7 measures are that actually you get from the regulator of social housing. But if you actually want to look into it a bit further, there is a guidance document actually telling you how they put together and what is inside the headline social cost per unit. So you can actually work like me to your heart's content, going through the fine detail, seeing how they work out the headline social housing cost per unit, and does it include the relevant assumptions that we actually see in a development appraisal? Big question. This is typical of the information that comes out from those value for money metrics. This is indicating in 2002 what the new supply, so that percentage of new homes being delivered across the Homes England regions of England. And I apologise if this is England centric at the moment. We've got some attendees from Wales. Hello, Wales. And certainly elements of what I'm going to be talking about are relevant to you. But we would love to customize it to a Welsh client group as well. But this is typical from England in terms of indicating what the new supply has been of social units and what non-social units have been supplied. And there is a commentary that goes with this that basically says in the northeast, where market values are close to rented levels, there is less supply. Where there are high market values, there are actually increased supply, and you can see that around London and the southeast, and then moving into sort of the east and the southwest areas. There's plenty of information if you actually want to go and look at all of this, but I'm not harping on that. However, there is also, once they've gathered all your global accounts, this is a new feature. If you really want to get into this in an anarchy way, there is the ability to select your own peer group from the statistics that the regulator have collected. So there is a new toolkit inside the value for money metrics, which are attached to a report on the global accounts. That's what the document's about in the lower right-hand window. And you can actually see what London and Quadrant reports are, and you could actually build a peer group of your own providers from the data that has been supplied back to the regulator of social housing.
John, just a quick question then. Does anyone get access to that?
Yeah, everyone. It's freely available online. You can go online. It's a government document, but it's only going to show you those 7 fairly dry value for money metrics. It's not going to drill down into, are my assumptions effective?
No, so this is at high level. Yeah. Okay.
So we've actually got a poll for you. What should we benchmark? I've given you an idea of what the regulator is benchmarking on, but that's kind of across the whole area of delivery, isn't it? And over to you, Andrew, in terms of actually.
Well, you've done it, John. As you've taken my thunder, but it's absolutely fine. You know.
Right.
So we have our first poll. It should be on screen, and I think you can start entering your answers for the poll 1, which is most important development data to benchmark. What's the most important development data to benchmark in your opinion? Is it build cost, square meter, land cost per tenure? We've got here. We've got a loan interest rate per tenure, an external subsidy per tenure, and it goes on because there's a bar on the right to catch me out. And you've got MPV discount rate and period per tenure. Okay. Landlord allowance per tenure. What's a landlord allowance per tenure?
It's allowances. So that's the
allowances. Right, okay.
The responsive repairs, the management, major repairs, voids and bad debts. Should we be benchmarking those? So basically this poll is saying what's the most important out of these? They could all be important, but we'd like some feedback from people in terms of what they would find meaningful. And I can't vote on this.
Morning, Paul. No, I can't vote either. What's how are we doing, Paul? Okay. Once we get this poll underway.
How do we know when people have voted?
It's the numbers you can see are increasing as people.
I can't see any numbers. Andrew. You're in charge.
I've got loosely. I've got the numbers of everyone. 10 out of 10. 11. Yep, we've got people voting still, so we'll give that a couple of minutes.
It's quite a large poll, so I'll give people a couple of minutes before I close it back down.
You can scroll down. There's quite a few on that. So can you obviously pick more than one? Can't you? Not important. Somewhat important. Yeah. And with this.
We've got 2 other polls, and this is probably the longest one. So just to give people a heads up about this.
We can obviously get this information back to everybody, can't we, Cassie? At the end of what the information was.
Of course, yeah, that's absolutely fine.
On the follow-up, we will publish the information. Okay.
Okay, so we've had that benchmark poll. Oh, we got some results. Right.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, just letting the audience see the results for a few seconds, and we can share that afterwards as well.
Okay. Right. So the power of development benchmarking specifically. So this is the power of looking at our area of development, which should help inform strategy and decision making, and it should help with cost and performance data. So getting involved specifically with the detail of development benchmarking. What do we have in the past? If there's anybody out there as old as I am, they might remember the pains of engaging with Achilles online in the early days of reporting benchmarking back to a government body. HQI's Achilles, and that might ring a few dim and distant bells with people. Again, ringing a few bells with people might be SDS Catalyst, one of our own at SDS, where we provided a benchmarking club, and people sent us their appraisals and information about their organization, and we benched and reflected that back to them. I did that both as a customer, and latterly towards its end, I did it internally at SDS, receiving those reports and actually trying to get members to submit the relevant data at the relevant time. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that was quite onerous. Yeah. Housemark is out there. Now, Housemark, you might be aware of as a benchmarking entity. It's actually owned by the NHF and the CIH, which is quite interesting. But the only development data that's in Housemark is actually how many homes did you develop as a percentage of your stock. It is separated out by tenure, so maybe that's an improvement on the regulator for social housing. You are actually telling them the tenure. Here comes the regulator with their regulatory framework. We all know about governance and finance in terms of evaluation. We've talked about the value for money, 7 basic metrics, and there is the rent standard, and these are known as the economic standard for the regulatory framework. And then we've got 5 other standards that are called the consumer standards. And the latest of that is the tenant satisfaction measures that arose from concern that registered providers weren't in touch enough with their residents over serious issues. And that was reflected back at us as a tenant satisfaction measure, came in April this year. We currently now do the assumptions report, which is by request from a customer, us evaluating what assumptions they've got inside Proval compared to their peer group in the sector and providing commentary on that. What we are starting to see in the future and emerging is ESG reporting, or environmental, social and governance reporting. That's coming from the finance sector, who are being lobbied to say, where is your investment going? Is it ethical? How do you know that? So we've also got the carbon agenda with streamlined energy and carbon reporting as a requirement now on RPs. And we've also got the emergence of sustainability reporting standard for social housing. Andrew and I attended a talk on this, and it was very interesting to hear an ex-chief exec of Peabody who's put this together, saying he's talked to the banks based on their lending and ethical lending. They actually want to gain evidence that you are actively reducing carbon, and you may benefit from a reduced margin on your interest rate. It's about ethical lending and carbon reduction. So maybe there's something more. What we don't want to do is add to your tasks. We want to actually make something meaningful. So that's what this webinar is about, because we recognize how much regulation and reporting there is out there. So Catalyst, we looked at on average a 3-year program for members of Catalyst. It was based on a peer group, and we also had the details of the overhead costs of that peer group. It looked at your appraisal assumptions, it looked at your typical subsidy and finance costs, and it provided back a report and some commentary to you. And you could request more detailed commentary if you really wanted to. But it's interesting to look at. It worked on 3 years of your pipeline, if you like. What do we do currently? Well, the assumptions report is commissioned by a customer We've done over 100 of them now for customers, and some of that is repeat business, so year on year. We ask them to fill out a template of their development assumptions that are used in the ProVal viability software. We look at that in relation to your Homes England region and also organisation size and peer group. So we are trying to compare apples with apples. We actually give you a sector range of each assumption, and we give you a recommendation on where your assumption could be to improve things. We use a RAG rating, red, amber, green, and provide STS comment and a recommendation to you in terms of moving these forward. We describe the sector methodology, the challenges and the trends, and we provide an executive summary. And in the last 2 weeks, I've actually spoken to 2 different customers who, once they'd received their reports and had provided comments, they actually wanted an online session with a group of their colleagues to actually talk it through before they went and spoke with their board in terms of how they looked at their business plan. Because what we're finding is development assumptions link back to your 30-year business plan. Now, Andrew's not aware of this, but what's the future going to look like? Well, we might give you weather reports, yeah? Whether you should do something or not. There could be a choice of services. So you could actually select what level of engagement or feedback or benchmarking you want with us. We could be looking at downloading your appraisal, whether we're in a cloud environment or an AWS environment. So very kind of formulated around you as a customer choice. And we also want to shape it around your peer group, so apples with apples. We want to look at your appraisal assumptions on the same red, amber, green process. And we want to be thinking about and looking at land, build, fees, subsidy and tenures inside your projects. Yeah. So we need to get that apples with apples reports and commentary going as well. So whether you should do a development or what the economic weather is actually looking like. That was the play on words with the weather reports. But there we go. That's the STS context. Yeah. And we'll also provide, obviously, executive summary. Now, we talked about benchmarking to inform decision-making, cost and performance. We've also seen a comment that from the regulator saying this is really critical that boards get their heads around this because there's limited resources. And we're seeing pressure on development pipeline because expenditure is needed on existing stock, reducing carbon and net zero. So we're certainly seeing a tightness on the development pipeline. How do we balance this and create a sustainable business? Well, if we follow what the regulator's saying, we actually need this firm foundation of understanding at a board or committee level, and they should actually identify the core purpose of your organization. And that core purpose will evolve. So your core purpose might be to provide more affordable housing in the communities within which we exist. Yeah. Your strategy should then say what particular tenures, you know, in what areas you're going to be providing. So you've actually got a bit of a structure. Now that should lead to policies of who you're going to house, what tenures you're going to use, where it's going to be, so geographically you don't waste time, when you're going to do it, so timing, and how you're going to afford it. Now, who, what, where, when, how is quite simply the policy that supports your business plan, and it's evolved from your strategy. Now, there's a requirement for you to actually have a rolling 30-year business plan if you are a registered provider, and also if you're a local authority with your HRA account. So this business plan is basically what you're going to support your pipeline with. Yeah. And your pipeline is your potential developments into the future that actually build a program year by year. And this program year on year builds, and you're going to be working in the organic world of development opportunities. Yeah. So where is the land coming from? Where is the next opportunity? But as a sustainable business, you're actually going to grow these projects. Yeah. And they might be positive projects in terms of providing a positive financial return to the organization. And but because of your social purpose or your core purpose, you might be spending money on supported housing, specialized housing, where you don't actually see an economic financial return, but you actually see a social return or a benefit on another budget such as health. Yeah. So this is a diagram to explain the structure to boards and committee members and also development teams, how you build up your sustainable business. And you need to balance strategy and opportunity to create this sustainable business. And how many positive projects and negative projects can you support in your business plan that you are evolving? So alongside what you're trying to do as a sustainable business, you've got the regulator. I won't stop talking about the regulator because it is part of the environment in which you actually have to operate. So we've got the economic standards that we talked about, governance, value for money, rent standard, and we've got the consumer standards that we've talked about. That's part of the environment in which you work, but also part of the environment in which you're trying to grow this sustainable business. You've actually got the commercial world where you're competing for land. What is your build? What is your fees? Yeah, you're competing alongside commercial developers. So the land, the build, the fees. What's your borrowing rate? What's your view on inflation? Yeah, and business planning. How are sales values going to affect your pipeline, your program, your business plan? Yeah, is that part of your aspirations of who, what, where, when, how, and strategy? There is also audit. This is part of your world, yeah, as well. So procurement, what contractual methods are we going through? What's happened since Brexit? How are we compliant with procurement? Oh, we've got that zero carbon agenda to deal with as well. All of these are in your environment around your sustainable business. We've also got people checking on us more thoroughly on standards. We've got environmental standards coming in, fire and safety, quite rightly. Contractors, they come and go. Have we got good ones? Yeah, are they going to disappear? Is it going to affect our business? Have we got too much exposure with certain contractors? Oh, and what's happened to material costs? Yeah, I've got all the best plans in the world to deliver homes, but actually material costs have gone up. And then I have to consider, what are my modern methods of construction options? So there's a lot for us in the sector to consider. How do we benchmark this and what's the priority? Have we got the right staff skills? Who's our competition? Are we dealing with specialist housing? Are we a statutory housing provider? Are we providing projects that others will not provide for commercial purposes? Yeah, are we a specialist housing provider? And what about those new tenures that pop up from time to time? How are we going to deal with those within our business plan? Yeah, so it's an interrelated operating environment that you're trying to have this sustainable business. Yeah. So if we go back to this sustainable business and where we've actually got projects, the little peas, if you like, the apples that are coming from our projects tree. Yeah. When we look at a positive project, this is getting quite detailed now, and this is the world that SDS inhabits, which is looking at individual projects. And we can actually look at the project NPV and the loan repaid, etc. criteria, but there are lots of other areas we could actually look at. But within that project, you might have a range of tenures. You might have some affordable rent, or within this project, you might have some shared ownership. And again, we can look at the tenure performance and the loan repaid. And if I've got a positive green project, it's saying my affordable rent is positive, my shared ownership is positive. Oh, I've got some first homes in this project, but they're actually a negative. So I can actually have a positive project, but with a negative tenure inside of it. Yeah. And do the board understand this? Do I understand this as a development manager? Hopefully you do if you're using Proval. And then we've got some outright sale in this project that is a bit amber. It's a bit like, you know, will it go red or will it stay green? Yeah. It's on the cusp. So within one positive project, you could actually have a variety of viability with different tenures. And this is the area where we can even drill down at SDS down to the unit level. So even in my affordable rent, which actually looks positive by this diagram, within my affordable rent, I've actually got one positive and one negative. Yeah. And so we at SDS can look at unit net present value and loan repaid year. So when you're looking at a positive project, be careful of what's inside it, is basically the message. Yeah. Is it as healthy as you think it is? And this is an example from, apologies, Paul. I had a quick look at what appraisal I could get hold of, and this was appraisal I could get hold of. And on the left-hand side, we've actually got what probably familiar users of Proval will understand as the summary window, with a grey area at the top indicating the overarching appraisal performance, where we've got a positive position of NPV at first handover of £129,000. And then down the side, we've actually got the different colours of the different tenures. And lo and behold, affordable rent is indicating a positive performance as a collective tenure. The 6 units there producing 56,583 positive. If, however, you wouldn't know from this until you actually, so we've got the first handover of the project and it's a positive project. Affordable rent looks positive as a tenure. Shared ownership looks positive as a tenure. First homes is negative as a tenure. Well, you're building something at 70%. No, you're selling it at 70% of its market value. What's it taking to build it? Yeah, and you're getting no grant on it. It's a discounted market sale tenure. An outright sale, yeah, well, that's kind of bringing in a positive at the moment over 2 units. But until you actually drill down into the unit results, yeah, and here we can actually see in column A, which is yellow for affordable rent, choose your own colours. We can actually see column A is a negative, producing a negative NPV, even though the tenure collectively on the left-hand side is indicating positive. So that's a wheelchair flat that's producing a negative NPV, but the other flats that are affordable rent are producing enough of a surplus to counteract that negativity. But it might be you as a development or project manager saying, well, I need more grant for these wheelchair flats. Yeah, that could kind of make the difference. Alternatively, we could actually look at column E where we've got first homes. Well, they're producing a negative NPV. They're the worst performing unit, minus 100,000. Now, and then outright sale is kind of on the cusp. It's producing a positive 5,500-ish. But what if sales values were to change? Heaven forbid for that environment to be around our business, our sustainable business. That's going on at the moment. So actually, yes, wouldn't I say as an advocate of SDS and Proval, don't we do a great job? Because you can actually look at your project performance, but you can drill down right to the unit detail and actually say, I either need some more grant or I need to change my mix on this project. And that's a power of unit benchmarking that is already available inside Proval at the present time. Yeah. So I hope I haven't overplayed my hand. I hope I've opened a few people's eyes that actually you can have negative and positive projects, properties, but drill down to the detail and it might inform your design decisions. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. We can also show you when the loan repaid year is. Yeah. And first homes never repays its loan, and that wheelchair flat repays its loan at 52 years. So, but overall, look at the project. It repays its loan over 32 years because we've got an element of cross subsidy happening here. But the devil is in the detail, and how much detail do we want to get to with our benchmarking? So, poll number 2. Oh. At what project stage should we benchmark? So,
Cassie will bring that up. Wow, that's a lot of detail there, John. That's good. Right.
At what stage is it most beneficial to benchmark development projects? Because we're talking about we're realizing there is a lack of detail in the reporting we have to do at the moment. But if we are to evolve a meaningful benchmarking service for development projects, at what key stage of a project is it the most beneficial to benchmark projects? And picking up Andrew's point, it could be internal benchmarking.
Yeah.
You know, we could help you with internal benchmarking, not just external peer group. So you might want to internally benchmark yourselves.
Yes, I think that is so important, and it's an area that needs exploring and seeing how clients are doing it, because with the challenges on delivery and staffing, I think it's an area that maybe not being analysed as much internal, how your appraisal schemes are being benchmarked against each other, and getting the data from that to guide you on new schemes going forward. What do you answer on this then, Paul? Bring him into the conversation. You're probably saying some really insightful stuff, but without your mic on.
My apologies, I forgot.
That's okay.
I think some of what most of what John is saying is absolutely ideal. When should you benchmark? Do we want to call it benchmarking? I think quite a few organizations would look at the mix during a feasibility and find out. So in ProVal, you can do a consolidation. Can I add my feasibility appraisal to a program? So there are some organizations would create a consolidation for their whole build program, and I've done it before for a Midlands group, where they, in actual fact, they did their 3-year bid program as a consolidation, and then every time they did a new appraisal that was of significant size, they added it to their consolidation to find out, did this change our organizational outlook going forward for the next X number of years? So it depends, I think, a lot on the organization as to whether they're running tight to the wind or not. There are some organizations that are have plenty of surplus. Perhaps it's not quite so important for them. And I think this is an internal decision. I'd like to have the conversation with people when I'm talking to them, and open up that you can do this kind of thing. Is it unique to ProVal? I don't think so. I think some of our competitors are sort of similar. I'm not quite sure exactly how easy it is with their software, but should you be asking yourself, should we be doing more shared ownership? Sometimes you're forced down this road. I know, for instance, where I live, that of the affordable elements that you have to provide in a development, they want 40% of it to be shared ownership. Well, that's okay in a high value area, but that would be not terribly clever in an area where you have lower value. So I think area specific for the organization where you're operating, you might operate in more than one area. We do have some organizations that we deal with that operate all over the country. So should there be benchmarking in their different peer zones, if that's exactly the kind of conversations that we've got to have.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Yeah, my comment is both feasibility and at practical completion. I think you've got to kind of review it and constantly review it and drill into the detail. But right, we've got 15 minutes left. We've got no questions, so please, anyone out there, ask a question. And then we'll continue.
So if you remember our project example and slicing it open and actually seeing the different tenures inside and finding it wasn't quite as positive as we thought it was, how do we actually build these projects? Well, we build it with cogs inside ProVal, don't we? ProVal is a viability box, yeah, and inside that box we've actually got the cogs that are doing the viability calculation. So we put in the land price, we put in the build price, we put in the fees, and all these other things, subsidy, and all these things turn together to actually work out what sort of viability have we got going on per unit column that we've actually got inside SDS. And these unit columns build up to make the tenure performance, and then the tenures make up the project performance. But actually, we need to understand all these different cogs and how they work inside ProVal, and whether they are the most effective that they could be. And that's really where our current assumption report sits. It's actually looking at the cogs in the box, if you like. Yeah. This is, and I've this is just screenshots, and I've been very careful not to share anybody's information other than what tenures a particular customer used. I don't think they'd be problematic with that, and also that they're on a standard 52.18 rental weeks. But basically, if you were to commission an appraisals report, you basically get a report that is red, amber, green across all the development assumptions inside, from start to finish, inside Proval. And this was for Barking and Dagenham, so we do reports for London boroughs, we're local authorities everywhere. We've done various customers, up and down the country, and local authorities want to know, and this was particularly challenging, they have a development company within or outside the local authority, and they wanted comparators in London, outside of London, with local authorities and with housing associations. And this ended up being a 40-page report, but the essence of it is actually us looking at the cogs inside their development assumptions and saying whether they are efficient or not, or outside what the sector are working with. So hopefully I haven't stepped on anybody's toes there, but I've given you an indication of what an appraisals assumption report may be. So the cogs in the box. If we're talking about the key benchmarking ones, one of the big ones at the moment is interest rates or loan. In Proval we call it loan, but everyone talks about borrowing or interest rates. Again, we can have public works loan at what was a low rate. It was around 2.5%. It's now jumped to over 4%, and we're hearing yelps of pain from our housing association colleagues as they draw down their finance at a higher rate than they were expecting. Some of them have secured long-term rates at 2.5%, and others are currently taking down loans around 5.5%. Where is that going to travel? So that's a big one that we comment on. And also we comment on the loan type per tenure. Local authorities are cascaded guidance from the Treasury via the Green Book that actually says they should use annuities, whereas most housing associations use the overdraft method. And Paul is a great advocate of the overdraft method. It's basically net rent to pay the interest first, and then it eats away at the capital loan. I won't go into too much detail. What I'm talking about is the cogs inside viability and how it's important to evaluate each cog to be more efficient. So net present value discount rate per tenure, what we're talking about here is a margin for risk above the borrowing rate usually. And where we're seeing the sector move is on those core tenures like social rent, where I've got an evidenced waiting list with the local authority, and it's my core business. If you remember that core purpose of your organization, if it's that core business and there's a high demand for it, stroke waiting list, and you get voids and bad debts, why would you put a margin for risk on top of that to make it less competitive? Again, sorry, it's very anarchy, but we are in the mechanical details of what the cogs are in the box. And this is the level of detail and commentary. Well, this is actually less commentary, but this is making sure your appraisals are as efficient as they could be. Some people are moving their discount period out to 60 years plus on those core tenures again, because they've got a grant agreement with Homes England that says you must manage and maintain a permanent home for 60 years. So some boards are saying on those 10 years, I will push out my discount period, and you can have different discount periods per tenure. Yeah. We need to understand your location. So we understand from your local authority, not only for performing the social rent calculation, but also we all want to compare you apples and apples in the sector with an HE region, Homes England region. And we also, sorry, we also look at your organisational stock size by looking at your latest financial statements. Sorry, were you coming in there, Andrew?
I'm just saying 4-minute warning, that's all.
4 minutes? Okay,
4 minutes.
right.
Very informative, loving all of it. But...
So landlord allowances, yes, we look at all of these.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And we also need to talk to you about shared ownership staircasing as well. maybe we can make these slides available as a PDF afterwards. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, slides will be
project
available.
components. We need to talk about the land per unit, whether it's a discounted land. We're probably going to benchmark more on open market value, because how can we benchmark on discounted land value? We probably need to look at the equivalent open market value.
Yeah, yeah.
Very importantly, build works. Yeah, build works cost per meter squared per tenure. Yeah, we can see that from the appraisal. Fees, probably we won't go into too much detail, but as a percentage of the works cost, because if we start thinking about acquisition and works, it could be free land. So I'm kind of being a bit radical here, and maybe we need to move to fees as a percentage of the works costs, because we don't know about the free land scenario. This is an interesting one. Floor area. We need to probably look at floor area versus the national described space standards, because Homes England will accept up to, or down to, 85% of NDSS. So compared with your competitors, are you building to space standards at 100% of NDSS, or are you at 85? You know, that can affect big time your appraisals. And obviously we need to look at subsidy per unit per tenure. We can even look at it per person if need be. Where your subsidy source is coming from, what your overheads are, what your sales and marketing costs are. I'm nearly there, guys, but we will also talk through and probably ask you to highlight what is your preferred outcome metric. What is your hurdle rate that you are actually wanting to put together? Paul's got his hand up for a question.
We've got a couple of questions.
John, there's a couple of questions that need answering,
Right.
and you're probably best placed for them. In the
Shall I
Q&A.
finish shall I do them
Yes.
now or finish the presentation?
No, Paul's going to let John finish first.
Okay, right. All of these sort of typical hurdle rates, where, you know, which is the most important, what's adding value to you. So the method of benchmark reporting, what would be beneficial to you? This is the final poll, which is how should we report back to you if we benchmark your development assumptions?
Okay. Cassie, have we got the next poll up, please? And whilst we're waiting for that poll, we can answer these two questions. So the question I was going to ask actually, John, how the poll is up, most useful method of benchmarking reporting, the poll is up, so you can start looking at that on screen. And how often should you recommend, or do you recommend, or do we recommend you review your assumptions on the development main assumptions that we look at?
It's linked to your long-term business plan. Yeah. So you've got to have this rolling 30-year long-term business plan that should be approved annually by the board. Would I say you should check your assumptions annually? Yes, you should check your assumptions annually. Whether you should come to us for a report annually, what can you afford it? Yes. Can you afford not to?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both, isn't it? You do one big report and then you do a follow-up. We do a kind of like a mini report, and the sector is changing so rapidly recently. So, you know, with our RPs, you know, for-profit RPs coming into the sector, that's been a disruptor, has changed things, and that could be locally. A lot of things where you operate could have changed quite dramatically. So, and local authorities coming in, that has again changed the landscape slightly. So I think all those elements can be assessed and reviewed by us, and that's why we're looking at a continued service with the clients that we want and shaping that service. So we're here to support you, and then wanting to look at your internal benchmarking and help and support you benchmark your schemes against each other, and let us do the hard work of that because obviously software is in the cloud, and we can do a lot more interaction with that going forward. That's the plan. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. And yes, the PowerPoints will be available in some format by after this presentation. Do you want to comment about the result on this? Has it all been done? Is everyone there?
Oh,
Yes.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll take that.
Yeah. Okay, I'm probably up against it time-wise.
Yeah.
But
You've got 3 minutes and a little bit over. We always
okay.
have a couple of minutes in the bag, John. That's always good.
So we're going to inform strategy and decision making, and we're going to include cost and performance data. Think about your positive project, yeah, and think about your negative project. Remember, we found some negativity inside the positive project that maybe we should be aware of as a project manager, yeah. Remember what the regulator is saying, that it's more important that the boards have a clear understanding of their organization's performance and that they can take evidence-based decisions about limited resources. Yeah. Oh. And remember, we are evolving these weather reports. Yeah. Whether you should do something. Yeah. What's the weather in your environment like? And we want you to talk to us about what would be useful to you. Yeah. And hopefully that's going to make your sustainable business. But there are competitors emerging around you. Yeah. But hopefully we're working in the same environment all together. Yeah. So depending whatever size, you've got a sustainable business, because there's such housing need that we actually need everybody to contribute. Yeah. And that, guys, you won't be surprised, is pretty much it. So we're good for time. And that's it.
That's brilliant.
I'm done with my presentation. Well, I will stop sharing. You can
stop sharing. That's great. That was really informative. Lots of detail as always, John. That was really good. Paul, you can put your hand down if you unless you want to answer another question to John. Just left to say, well, a minute left. Thank you very much for attending. Great session, John. A lot of work there that's put on and detailed stuff. And as John said, we want to hear what your challenges are and what evolving this service that we want to give back to you. You know, as you said, we've got a lot of clients doing the kind of benchmarking reporting that have come to us to do that, and we want to enhance that service and make it easier for you to have a continued service with us. So watch this space, and we'll be coming out to some of our clients in kind of October time to talk about kind of product development and continuing business. So we want to hear, and it'd be a good time actually to have a kind of roundtable discussion about certain aspects of STS's business and improving that as we go forward. Our next webinar, as John alluded to there, we went to a conference in Wales recently. It was really interesting, and we met a couple of people from Devonshire's, your kind of solicitors, your go-to solicitors in the sector. We've worked with them before, and I've asked them to join us on a webinar to talk about ESG. So the emergence of this, discussing what it is, what does it mean to you, regarding finance treasury. So I'm pleased to announce we've got Natalie Swales, who's a partner in the finance side, and Brendan Sarsfield, I think I say his name. He's the ex Peabody, is it Peabody? Yeah, Peabody CEO, and now is heading up the kind of awareness campaign on ESG. ESG means environmental social governance, and it's affecting every business, and particularly this sector, and obviously carbon and what's happening in reducing that, linked to finance treasury loans. So that'll be a good session. That's going to be in September the 27th. Put that in your diary. Have a wonderful holiday. Enjoy it, have a break, and we're here if there's any business you would like us to kind of help you with over the summer, and you can contact us in the normal way. And good day.